Chapter 23. Ensign Haley still wasn't sure if she should be flattered or insulted. She couldn't decide if Grotter was using her or not, and she wasn't altogether sure how much or how little of the truth he was telling her. She also wasn't sure she could ask him. "You're relieved of your duties," he had said to her in the privacy of his cabin. "I have a more important task for you." He explained to her how she would continue to sit at the same console that she'd sat at before, but he'd arranged for an ensign off the bridge to handle her formal tasks, and then she'd be allowed to do what she was supposed to do. "And what's that?" she had asked. "Why, draw, of course," he said. "Doodle, draw, don't think about it much. Anything that comes to mind or half a mind, just draw it, and then read it over to me." "You want me to spend my time doodling, sir?" He nodded. "You really don't have any idea, do you?" he asked. "Any idea of what, sir?" "You didn't recognize what you drew?" he asked. "No," she said. Then she said, "Well, it looked like the unitologist symbol." "That's right," he said. "It's much more than that. Can I share something with you?" he asked. She said, startled. But the hesitancy with which she'd responded had made him clam up again. "It's tied to our work on the planet," he said. "What you're doing, Ensign Haley, is important work. It might not seem so, but it is. You'll have to take my word for it. You need to be careful who takes advantage of it." She had laughed. "You must be joking, sir," she had said. But apparently he was not, for here she was now, sitting at her console, scribbling with her stylus on her digital pad. She'd been doing it for more than a week now, and spinning each doodle over to Grotter as soon as she felt she was ready to move on to a new page. Grotter's response had been impassive at first, then slowly he had begun to express his disappointment. "No," he finally said. "It's not it. It's not helping at all." "Perhaps if you'd tell me what you'd like me to draw," she said, "then I could be of more help." He shook his head. "No," he said. "If it's to be of any use to us all, it just has to come." But ever since primary school, she'd been trained to please, and she was incredibly frustrated that now, somehow, she couldn't. She tried to second-guess what Grotter wanted. He'd been initially pleased when she drew some version of the unitologist symbol, so she drew it again, and saw for the briefest moment a flicker of excitement when he saw it. But the excitement quickly faded. "Stop thinking," he scolded her. "Just let it come." Let what just come? It might have gone on much longer like that, might have gone on just like that, until the moment when Grotter, frustrated, gave up on Ensign Haley and returned her to her duties. But Grotter, luckily, was not a man to become easily frustrated, and also, luckily, something happened first. They were, Grotter would realize, when he looked at the data later, at the point in their loop where they were directly above the man-made facilities on Hespera's surface. They were also, due to sloppy navigation on Ensign Orther's part, closer to the surface than they usually were. And finally, instrumentation would reveal there had been a burst of energy from the planet's surface, from the marker. Suddenly, Haley had given a little cry and clutched her head. "Headache?" he heard Orther ask. Every time the man spoke, it filled Grotter with irritation. It was partly because he knew the man was a plant from Blackwell, but in addition, the man was simply irritating. Even toying with that technician down on the surface, Wandre, pretending not to remember his name, didn't help much. It must have been a bad one. Ensign Haley had her head in her hands for 20 or 30 seconds, and seemed a little dazed after. What was it, he wondered? Simply a migraine? Why had it seemed to come along so suddenly? He watched her for a while. For a few moments she was still, and then she picked back up her stylus and continued her task. "Ensign Haley?" he said. She raised her head and gave him a tired look. "Yes, sir?" she asked, her tone flat. "Leave the bridge and take a few moments to gather yourself," he said. For a moment he thought she was going to protest, as she had before, but instead she gave a curt nod, spun what was on her pad over to his vid, and stood up to leave. She was halfway to the door when she realized what she'd sent him. "Wait a moment, Haley," he said. She stopped and paused on the far side of the bridge, waited while he took a closer look. A new series of equations. Crystallization counter sequence. The gray man had called one part of the first set, or something similar if not exactly that. He recognized a few of the occasional gestures that he'd seen alongside the first sketch, but he didn't know how to be enough, or know enough to be able to judge how important or how genuine they were. He would have to send them along, see what the gray man felt they amounted to. The image alongside them didn't look at all like the marker, but there was a small rough sketch of the marker lower on the page, and he realized that the rectangle he was seeing was a cutaway, a cross-section from the marker. "Needs a bridge, Ensign Arthur," he said. "What?" said Arthur. "I'm not the one with the headache," he said. "Sir," said Grotter faintly. "What?" said Arthur. "I'm not the one with the headache, sir," said Grotter. "Leave. That's an order." Arthur stood, face livid and with suppressed anger, but left. "Now's the rest of you," Grotter said. "All of you, except you, Ensign Haley." There was a moment of stunned silence, and then the bridge crews started up and cleared up, a dull rumbling going through them. It took them a few moments, but soon he was left alone with Ensign Haley. There was a long silence, which she finally broke. "What am I supposed to do, sir?" she asked. "Do your task," he said. "My task?" "Draw," he said. "I want you to sit in that chair and draw until you can no longer see. Then I want you to keep drawing." Confused, she sat and began. Almost immediately it was clear that something was happening. She quickly entered an almost trance-like state, and what came pouring out was complex and strange. Equations and models, plans and structures. He had always known she was special, but he hadn't realized just how special. She drew for hours before it began to fade and just become ordinary doodles again. He was not disappointed with the results, and more importantly, neither was the gray man. Chapter 24. There was a static and a whispering when the bursts came. It stayed with Istvan for more than a little while, even once the visions had begun to fade, and within it, if he listened hard enough, he could hear voices. They were incomplete and partial, but they were voices, he was sure of it, or nearly sure, and they were not, as the other voices had been, merely a squashed repetition of words he had said himself. No, these were voices. Now all he had to do was train himself to listen hard enough so that he could hear them. He took to sitting in his cell, on the edge of his bed, his feet flat on the floor, his hands on his knees, just listening. It reminded him of sitting on the edge of his bed late at night when he was a boy and practicing blanking the world out. There were the general noises he could hear around him, the sound of footsteps, the voices of the other inmates, a rustle or creak here or there, but these he tried to learn to unlisten to tune out completely, and in a certain manner, and after a few days, he succeeded. Then there was the sound of his heartbeat, the noise of his own breathing, the noises coming from his body and stomach. These too he learned to unlisten to, first dulling them and then reducing them to nothing at all. It came slowly and had to be redone every time he sat down again, but it could be done. And then once in that space of silence, he had to sharpen his ears still farther, had to not only make them listen to the rumble of whispering voices beneath everything, but to home in on just one of them, to pick it out, to start to hear its words. It took 6 days, days in which he hardly ate, hardly even moved. At first, his fellow prisoners were worried about him and clustered around him, but after he ignored them for a few hours, they gave up, left him alone. Occasionally, one of them would come back, Waldron mostly, but wouldn't stay long. And though he found it an irritation to have someone shaking him, someone trying to talk to him, he quickly learned to ignore this as well. And then, late in the 6th day, his ears caught hold of the tail of a voice, and reeled it closer until he could hear it. It was incomplete and partial, but it was a real voice, speaking its own words, starting to say something. He massaged it, caressed it, until it grew a little, became a little louder. He could hear that it was addressing him. "Istvan," it was saying, "why won't you talk to me?" "But I don't even know who you are," he said. His lips were moving, he knew, whispering the words, but he could feel the words being uttered in his head as well. "Ah, there you are," said the voice. "Now you hear me." "I've been trying to talk to you all along," Istvan said. "And I've been trying to talk to you. It just took us a while to find the right tongues." Indeed, as they spoke, the voice became stronger, more confident. It stretched and scratched against the sides of his mind like an animal, and slowly grew larger. And he knew that now he'd be able to find it again, hear it again, whenever he went searching for it. And late on the 7th day, when the burst came again, he felt less pain this time. It was as if his head had been filled with living, thinking fire. The veil fell over things, tattered at first, and then becoming blazing with light, as it always did, and then even more quickly resolving into another colorful world. There is the face of Khan, his lips almost blue, his neck bloody. He hovered there, just in front of him, staring. "Hello, Khan," Istvan said. And this time, instead of letting the face take his words and use them as his own, Istvan imagined the voice that he'd been hearing drifting up from where, despite its growing size and power, it huddled and crouched in the background, and threading itself into the dead man's throat until Khan opened his mouth and spoke with it. "Hello," Khan said. The voice was strange, not quite properly synced with his lips, and he spoke with a wet burble as if his throat was still partially filled with blood. Air, too, hissed softly out from the holes in his windpipe. There, thought Istvan. Now we're getting somewhere. Chapter 25. "You'll want to see this," said Dr. Callie Dexter. Bryden turned away from his computer and looked at her. "All right," he said. "You have something you want to show me? Go ahead and show me." "Vectors," she said again. "You've already told me about the vectors. You did that a few days ago." Dr. Dexter nodded. "I have more data now," she said. She tugged on his chair until it rolled closer to her monitor. "I've charted every surge ever since the vector of our marker shifted. I've always also correlated it with the way it continues to broadcast, even when not engaged in a surge. Before, when a surge came, it would send a wide-range blast of energy into space, always a different vector, as if it was looking for something. But then something changed." "It's no longer broadcasting into space," said Bryden. "No," said Dr. Dexter. "Now it's a more focused blast, like a burst of energy being propelled out of a gun. It still spreads and widens a little, but much more slowly. Now it's always oriented roughly the same direction." "All right," said Bryden. "It's changed, so what?" Dr. Dexter smiled. "Here's the vector from the marker from Aegis 7, she said, "which incidentally has been firing its pulse simultaneously with this marker here. It's millions of miles away, so the system is quite wide by the time it reaches this far, but even so, if you calculate the center point of the wave, you find that it seems to pass exactly through our planet." Intrigued now, Bryden simply nodded. "Here's the last one from the project we're not supposed to know about, the one on Kremar. The reason we know about it is because the signal is also oriented toward the planet we're on, and it seems also to be coordinated with the other two." She pulled up a topographical map. "The planet's surface," she said. "Satellite photos. You don't know how hard it was for me to get this. Had to speak directly to Commander Grotter himself." "You should have gone through me," said Bryden. "I told him I was going through you," said Dr. Dexter. "Otherwise he wouldn't have given me anything." "You have no right," started Bryden. Callie turned away from her screen and smirked. "Oh, relax," she said. "We're all on the same team. You'll get the credit if things work out well, and if they don't, you can tell him you had nothing to do with it. If you're nervous about it, link with him right now. I'm sure they won't hesitate to yank it away." When Bryden, fuming, didn't say anything, she turned back to her monitor. "Here we are," she said, touching the screen with one finger. Bryden could see the specific shape of the compound, perhaps 2 inches across, a gray blot on the yellow-red surface that was the rest of the map. "Marker's approximately right here." She moved her finger slightly. "The vector carries us forward along this path," she said, dragging her finger, "which brings us right through here." She stopped on another gray blot, the penal colony. He knew it was there, saw it sometimes looming dimly on the horizon if he looked out the right window. But he had never been to it, let alone inside of it. It had nothing to do with their purpose for being on the planet. "You think it's broadcasting to the prison compound?" he asked. "I didn't say that," she said. "And it's not a broadcast exactly. It may be pulsing to something beyond that, on the other side of it, or maybe even something miles away. But I've had the computer calculate the center point of each vector exactly, When we do that, it looks like this. She touched the screen, and 3 sets of lines appeared on the map. They intersected there, right at the prison compound. "Oh my God," said Bryden. "Nifty, right?" said Callie. "That's not exactly the word I would have used," said Bryden. "What do you think it sees there?" "There you go, treating it like a person again. It doesn't see anything, it doesn't want anything. The marker's a mechanical device. You know that as well as I do. It's been programmed to look for something." No, thought Bryden, she's wrong. It's much more than that. But to Callie, he only said, "What's your best guess?" "My best guess? It's not very scientific, Bryden." And when Bryden didn't rise to take the bait, she raised her eyes upwards and seemed to examine the ceiling. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe there's something significant about the location. A certain kind of current or force there. A magic flux, perhaps. Even something we don't have the instrumentation to detect." "Could be anything," said Bryden. "Not quite anything," Dr. Dexter corrected. "But it could be a lot of things." He sighed. She always had to be right. "So what do we do?" "Do? What else can we do but go look for it?" "Somewhere in the middle of the penal colony," he said. "We go where the data takes us," said Dr. Dexter. "We're scientists." Bryden hesitated, then nodded. "I'll speak with the commander," he said. "We'll see what we can arrange." Chapter 26. "Help? You need help?" asked Istvan. "I don't need help," said Bill, mumbling it. "Who are you talking to, Istvan?" asked Waldron. He ignored them. They were in the world that he wasn't important. They weren't part of the world that really mattered. "Yes," said Dead Khan. "Help me. But how can I?" "Istvan, are you all right?" asked Waldron, placing his hand on his shoulder. He shook him off. "We need you," said Dead Khan. And as he spoke, his face slowly changed, becoming smooth. The wound in his throat slowly closed, and the throat changed too, losing its Adam's apple. A moment later, it was clear that his face was no longer a man's face, but a woman's. A moment more, and Istvan recognized his mother. "I need you," she claimed. "Nice trick," thought Istvan. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. "Come be with me." "What do you mean, come be with you? You're right here." His mother shook her head. "Find me," she said. "Come unto me." "I am trapped here," said Istvan. "I'm a prisoner, I can't leave." "We all are," said Waldron next to him. "You're no different from anyone else." But his mother just looked at Istvan as if she hadn't understood what he had said. Then she smiled. "It is you," she told him, "who will help change things." But now she was speaking in riddles. How was he to help her if he didn't understand what she was saying? And thinking that introduced a little seed of doubt into him. He hadn't liked his mother much when she was alive. Why should he listen to her when she was dead? Well, it wasn't his mother exactly, a part of him reminded himself, but someone or something else. Then what was it? The rest of him wanted to know. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Because he simply did not know. Maybe it wasn't even real. For many years, ever since he was a kid, he'd had a hard time telling what was real from what was not. Even he knew that. And yet it felt real, didn't it? And he wanted to listen to what was said. So why should he be afraid? And yet he was a little afraid. Maybe it was too much for just one man, especially if he was that man. And he was trapped here. Whatever it wanted him to do, how was he going to get out to do it? And how was he to know how to do it, even once he was out? "Why me?" he asked. "Because you can hear us best," said his mother. "You can teach us. You are teaching us to understand the others through you." Us, he wondered. But there was only his mother. And another seed of doubt was introduced. And then the burst came, a strong one this time. He heard Bill scream somewhere near him, the sound penetrating even into this other world. He felt a finger within his brain, touching it, prodding it, and then it felt like his head had caught fire and melted into slag. The world went strange, and he could see, suddenly, both worlds equally, but one through his left eye and one through his right, overlaid on one another, both still fully present. and then he found himself lying on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, both worlds in full carnival around him, as his fellow prisoners shouted or sweated or yelled or simply stood there, slowly banging their heads against the wall. Chapter 27. "You want us to do what?" asked Henry. On the vid screen, the commander's eyes shifted slightly to one side, the only sign Henry could see that he was at least a little uncomfortable with the request as well. "Mr. Jenkins, I know it's an unusual request," he said, "but it's very important. In fact, a great deal more important than the safety of the prisoners, or even, frankly, I regret to say, of you and the other personnel. And you can't tell me anything more about it." "I'm sorry, it's classified," said the commander. Henry tried again. "This is probably not the best time," he said. "The prisoners are acting strangely. Everyone's on edge, and some of them even seem to be teetering on the brink of something. Whatever is happening is affecting some of our people as well. Tempers are short. I keep on getting the feeling that something's about to erupt." "Whether it's the best time or not doesn't matter," said the commander. "You will do this, Vondre." And Henry realized that there was no debating the point. The commander was serious enough that he neglected to humiliate him by calling him by the wrong name. He nodded. "How long will they be here?" "I don't know," said the commander. "Perhaps a day, perhaps a month, as long as it takes." "How many of them will there be?" "They can bring as many of their people as they feel they need. There'll be at least one, Bryden. He's the leader." "And these are scientists? They're the ones working not far from us?" "That's right," said the commander. "I don't suppose it will hurt to admit that, if it makes you feel any better. You are to give them any assistance and every assistance, no matter how you feel about whatever they request. If they ask you to tear down a wall, you tear down a wall. If they ask you to cut off a prisoner's hand, you will cut off the hand. You are to follow all their orders, as if they were my own." "Can I ask what they're likely to request?" asked Henry. "You can ask Jenkins," said the commander, "but I can't tell you." "Classified?" The commander shook his head. "I simply don't know," he said. "Nor do I know how this request ties into their project exactly, but I know that they must be given every leeway." "What if they want to kill a prisoner?" "Then let them kill a prisoner," said the commander without hesitation. "The men you have there lost their rights a long time ago. They're no longer really people as far as the state's concerned." "What if they want to release a prisoner?" The commander hesitated more at this. "You release them into their custody," he finally said. "But you get in touch with me immediately as well, you understand?" When Henry nodded, the commander broke the link. Henry sighed. The job that was supposed to be temporary, a way of earning a little money so he could start some sort of business back on his own on Vindwaga, was becoming more and more complicated. And there was something wrong with the atmosphere here. His head hurt almost all the time, seriously throbbed. In addition to the brief piercing headaches, he was having something like aura migraines now as well. Strobing, throbbing headaches that moved like a psychedelic veil across his vision, obscuring sight in the first one eye, then the other. Maybe it was just the stress of the job that caused it, or he wasn't eating properly, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was tied to this place, that he'd be okay if only he could just leave. Nor could he shake, now that he was thinking about it, the feeling that the commander was out to get him. Was this all a trap? Or was he just being paranoid, just feeling trapped because he was living in the outer circle of a penal colony? Even though he wasn't a prisoner, he felt like one, and perhaps if he handled the situation wrong, even without meaning to, it would be a simple matter for the commander to order him to be moved from the technician's desk where he now sat and put into a cell on the other side of the wall. There were so many empty cells. Any of them could be waiting for him. He shook his head. What was wrong with him? Why was he so worried? He tried to laugh, but it sounded wrong, more like someone choking. He called the 6 guards and the other technician in, explained to them what was to happen. He watched the anger and suspicion and paranoia manifest itself on their faces, only slowly subsiding. Henry regarded each attentively with part of his mind, wondering which of these men is going to crack first. If he knew for certain, he could have the man put in a jail cell just for their own protection. But how could he know for certain? He'd have to put all of them in jail cells just to be safe, and even if he knew that if he started putting men in cells, then the remaining one would quickly put him in a cell. Before they knew it, everyone would be in a cell. Then it would all slowly starve to death. He shook his head. What was he thinking? This wasn't how he usually thought about things. No, he had to keep his head clear, especially now, especially in this time of stress, when he might need all his resources. He had to remember to be himself. Chapter 28. Jency waited until they were a few hours into the flight before asking Swanson where they were going. The big Swede just shrugged. Probably the same trip as we've done before, he said. But the captain's always close-mouthed about where we're going. Has to be, I guess. For most of the day they passed through the solar system, the captain letting the Evian slowly move along. Jency overheard one of the crew saying they were headed to the nearest shock point, and when he asked Swanson about it an hour later, as they did the rounds of the cargo hold, the man nodded and said yes, that was no secret. They would go there, and then from there they would go to the Venus shock point. Then they would go elsewhere, to a place that was secret. There are only a few shock point nodes reachable from the Venus node, said Jency. It's got to be one of those. Swanson smiled. I thought so too, first time we went, he said. But there's at least one more node than people know. One more node than people know, thought Jency later, lying to his berth, listening to the drunken snores of the Swede in the bunk just below him. Shock points were costly to build and took a long time, so the penal colony had not been hastily thrown together but was probably the result of years of planning. Either that, or the result of tremendous resources, maybe both. The Evian 2, he had noticed, was not your ordinary cargo freighter. The ship was state-of-the-art, one of the newest models with all the trimmings. He had congratulated the captain on being able to afford such a ship, but the man had just shaken his head. Not mine, son, he said. Belongs to the powers that be. The powers that be, he thought in his berth. That was always the problem, the powers that be. Though who they were and where they were to be found was often hard to say. They were behind things, lurking there, almost as if they occupied another world, safe and protected from the jolts and shocks of the world that ordinary people had to occupy. The node they approached seemed to be under construction, but the captain just plowed through the warning systems as if they didn't exist. And indeed, they didn't seem to exist for them. None of the alarms went off and no barriers went up. They were able to drift slowly into the node, and then there were the strangeness of entering a kind of tunnel of energy, the disorientation and near panic that came with it, and then the arrival into a new portion of space, a strange reorientation of the stars as other stars since they were elsewhere. But where exactly? The sun was not quite right for the Aspera system. For a moment he thought he'd made a mistake and joined the wrong crew, accidentally murdered a man for no reason, that he was just far away from his brother as ever. This is where we're going? He asked Swanson. The man shook his head. No shock point where we're ending up, he said. We just got close. It's another 2 weeks of travel through ordinary space, and then we'll finally get there. For the 2 weeks of travel, there was very little of either him or Swanson to do. They could only check the supplies and boxes so many times in a day before beginning to feel ridiculous, and so they drank. The ship was well stocked with alcohol, and Swanson had brought a few cases of his own in addition. And Swanson, always eager to start in, so it was up to Jency to keep him sober long enough for them to do their minimal rounds. Perhaps that had been Talbot's job too, when he was still alive. Swanson became more and more voluble over the course of the 2 weeks, but it also became clear that he knew very little. He didn't even know the name of the planet they were going to, and hadn't been curious enough to try to find out. The captain himself was slowly warming to Jency, though he also seemed a little concerned about him. Suppose I should have done a security check on you before taking you on, he said to Jency early one evening, staring at him thoughtfully. That's what the powers that be would have wanted. But we were in a rush, as you know, because of that damn Talbot going and dying on us. Plus Swanson vouched for you. Had I done a check, what do you suppose I would have found? Nothing, said Jency. The captain nodded. Nothing, he said. I'll accept that. We'll just have to say that I did a check after all, and that's what I found. A few days later, Swanson had the captain down to the supply room and opened a bottle with him. They joked back and forth between themselves, talking about the earlier runs, back when the captain had been in command of a very different ship, an old raggedy freighter that was years out of date. "And look at you now," said Swanson. "Look at us now." The captain sat there with an enigmatic half-smile and just kept drinking. Jency sat on the edge of a box a few feet away, observing the conversation but not really being a part of it. "The thing I don't understand," said Swanson, once he'd had a few, "is why did they choose us? They could have had any captain they wanted for the prices they were offering. Why us?" The captain shrugged. "Just luck, I guess," he said. "Just luck," said Swanson. "No," he said. "You've had luck before, but it's mostly been bad." "Maybe it was time for my luck to change. Or maybe they knew you could be discreet," said Swanson, tapping the captain on his chest. The captain didn't seem to take the tap badly, but he did say, "Not all of us in this room are so discreet," at which Swanson seemed to take the hint and stop talking. They kept drinking, Swanson the most, followed by the captain. Jency was having just enough to keep up appearances, watching carefully for the captain's gaze to go glassy and his hand to begin to wobble. After a while, Swanson crawled off his box, lay down on the floor, and passed out. The captain put down his glass and stood, straightening his jacket, but Jency stopped him. "There's still some in the bottle," he said. "Be a shame for it to go to waste." Halfway through the next bottle, he'd gotten the captain to talk openly. He wouldn't quite say the name Aspera, but he'd hinted enough about confinement and treason and the price of freedom that he didn't have to for Jency to feel confident about where they were going. He kept prodding the captain, encouraging him, but either he was exceptionally discreet, or the man really did know almost nothing about Aspera. He'd done deliveries, but he'd always stayed in orbit. The only ones to go down to the planet's surface were the freight specialists. "In this case, it'll only be Swanson," said the captain. "They'd have had to clear you back to spaceport on Vindwaga if we wanted you to go down. You can load up top in orbit, but you can't go down." So there was another problem he would have to face. He thought after the captain had left, as he was slapping Swanson and trying to coax him awake, trying to get him to return to their quarters. He had to figure out a way down to the planet. Maybe if it could prepare a box, slip into it himself, or maybe Swanson would end up sick and then he'd have to go. But the former option involved a certain amount of risk, particularly if he was caught, and the latter would draw attention to him as well. He managed to get Swanson awake enough to talk about the delivery process itself, though he had to keep shaking him and keep him talking. He hoped Swanson wouldn't remember any of it in the morning, and suspected he wouldn't after seeing how the man was after the next day, after previously drunken occasions. The process was this. They were to link first to a military ship in orbit, which would either give them permission to contact the penal colony or not. Then they would start taking loads down in the shuttle. Typically, Swanson would land outside the colony in a small dome that had breathable atmosphere, and then he and Talbot would unload. There were usually a military ship landed there with two soldiers, and once he and Talbot had unloaded everything, the soldiers went over to the manifest and carefully divided the items into 2 piles. "Why 2 piles?" asked Jency. Swanson shrugged. "I don't ask about these things," he said. "If they want to divide them into 2 piles, such is fine with me, but if I ask about it, maybe they'll ask me to help them move the boxes." He looked at Jency, his eyes heavy, as if waiting a response. "I see," said Jency finally, not knowing what else to say. This seemed to be enough. Swanson nodded. "Talbot, he didn't ask about it either, but he thought about it," said Swanson. "And what did he think about it?" "He didn't have to think much about it," he said. "We always saw the other sets of lights when we were preparing to land. There's another complex on the planet besides the penal colony." "What is it, another penal colony?" asked Jency. Swanson gave a sloppy shrug. "Why would they need 2 penal colonies?" he asked. No, Talbot didn't think so. He thought it must be something else. "Like what?" "Who knows," said Swanson. Then his eyes started to close. Jency shook him. What? Asked Swanson, coming with a jerk. If it's not a penal colony, what did Talbot think it was? I don't know, said Swanson. But he'd figured it this way. They had us land near the penal colony and unload there, not near the other complex. That meant that the other complex, whatever it was something that they wanted to hide more than the penal colony. Some sort of black ops operation, thought Jency, but much more hush-hush than a secret penitentiary in which they illegally imprisoned and perhaps even tortured traitors. What could it be? Whatever it was something deadly serious, and perhaps something to stay away from. Where is Talbot, by the way? Swanson asked. Talbot? Said Jency. He couldn't make it. Swanson smiled. Too bad, he said, and fell asleep. He pulled the man's boots off, tucked the blankets up around him, so he couldn't officially board the shuttle. Even if he did manage to get on the shuttle, there would be 2 soldiers down below waiting to make sure he got back on again and left. And if he hid inside a box, there were apparently about equal chances he would end up at some sort of secret compound rather than the penal colony. And to top it off, there was only a day, maybe 2 left before they arrived. Chapter 29. What are you looking for exactly? Asked Henry. We'll know when we find it, said Bryden curtly. At least he hopes we will, said Callie Dexter, and winked. There were 6 of them in all, with Bryden and Dexter clearly in charge. They had arrived only a few hours after the commander's call, bringing with them a vehicle full of equipment, which they had promptly started stringing all the way through space that Henry normally occupied. Some of them were sitting on the floor, others standing idly by. Bryden had immediately commandeered his desk and chair, which made it so that Henry had to watch the monitors standing. He wasn't doing a very good job of that, though, since he was distracted by the newcomers. How dangerous are they? Asked Bryden. These are killers or what? A few weeks ago I would have said not all that dangerous, said Henry. They're political prisoners rather than rapists or murderers. They feel very strongly about whatever their cause was, but usually are fairly ordinary apart from that. A few weeks ago, you said Bryden. What about now? Now I don't know, he said. They're restless. Something's wrong with them. I can't predict how they'll behave. Bryden was staring at him strangely. He came a little closer, took him by the arm, spoke softly. How do you feel? He asked. Me, said Henry, surprised. Fine, I guess. He tried to keep his eyes from darting around. What if this was a trap? What if all this had been set up as a way to trap him? Maybe that was why the project was classified. He tried to push the thoughts down, swallowed. No. Anxiety? Asked Bryden, standing too close to him and narrowing his eyes. No changes in behavior? Said Henry, not sure what it was best to answer. I'm all right, he finally said. It's a stressful time. Bryden raised one eyebrow. I can see you feel it, he said, his voice even softer now. Are you a believer? A believer? Asked Henry. Bryden reached into the neck of his shirt, pulled out his icon, a small twisting shape, the unitologist symbol. Altman be praised, he said. No, sorry, said Henry almost too quickly. I'm not a believer. Not that I have anything against it. You will be, said Bryden, slowly tucking his icon away, a smile still frozen on his face. You're feeling it already, but you just haven't admitted it yet. And with that, he turned away, went back to directing his team and setting up the equipment, leaving Henry a little shaken and not quite sure what to do with himself. It's here, thought Bryden. I'm sure of it. Whatever the marker wanted them to find was to be found here, and he, Bryden, was going to be the one to find it. He had been chosen to do so. His calling was a sacred one, and he could almost feel a holy crown there shining on his head, invisible for all to see except the truly sacred, the truly chosen. He would find it, and he would do whatever he needed to protect both it and the marker from all unbelievers. It had been a mistake to approach Wandry, the technician, as he had, but he had felt something, detected something in the man. He knew that Wandry felt something, just as he, Bryden, felt something. Everybody felt a little bit of something. That was how powerful the marker was, reaching out to believers and unbelievers alike, but for most of it was nothing significant, a headache, a little anxiety, or nausea. More and more people, though, were sensing a call to convergence, a call to lose their life so that they could find it, so that they could find a larger sense of unity in life in the One. Already 6 people among their numbers had let go of their lives, or had had them taken away by a well-meaning soul. And Bryden had made very certain that their bodies were prepared and preserved for the day they might rise again. Yes, he understood that the work here was holy. And there was Callie Dexter beside him suddenly. She was his affliction, the thorn in his side. She did not believe, and he knew better than to speak to her about his belief. She would not understand it. She would mock him. He would try to use it against him. No, she was there as a test for him, something for him to fight against and overcome, but quietly and subtly, with great care. "We're all set?" Bryden asked. Callie nodded. "All the monitoring equipment's in place. Now we just wait for a surge." "Yes," said Bryden. "But there are things we can do in the meantime." "Things like what?" "We need to get a feel for the place," he said. "We need to walk out there and sense its energies." "Energies," said Dr. Dexter. "What sort of mythical bullshit are you trying to feed me?" "I mean measure for any abnormalities," said Bryden, backtracking. "Magnetic abnormalities, pressure irregularities, any usual or unusual readings of any sort. Anything that can tell us what's there, what the marker's looking for." "There you go again," said Dr. Dexter. "Always thinking of the marker as a human." Bryden bristled. He wasn't thinking of the marker as human. Sentient, yes, but hardly human. It was far beyond human. "It's just a metaphor," he said. "I don't mean anything by it." Dr. Dexter gave him a hard stare. "I wish that were true," she said. "All right, let's see what we can find." Thank you. That was part 7 of Dead Space Catalyst. Thank you for listening, and good night.